I was standing at the mailbox at the end of the driveway checking my mail when a red BMW drove by and pulled into the neighbor's garage. As he pulled up to their garage, the door opened to let in the Beamer and then closed again. This seemed strange. I knew Kyle Good was out of town. Why would some guy come into their garage? I thought there could be dozens of innocent reasons. A cousin, maybe Doris's brother, who knows? And it's certainly none of my business. This incident was quickly forgotten when I noticed a letter in my mailbox from my sister living in Florida. Gina always writes excellent letters, full of family news and many articles clipped from the dozen or so publications she subscribes to. The next morning, as I was pulling out of my driveway to go to work, a Beamer drove past me so fast that I barely had time to brake to avoid backing into it. I might never have paid attention to this incident if my wife Jenny and I had not stopped by the Goods' house while walking the dog on Friday evening. The red BMW was parked on the street, and Kyle Good was standing on the porch talking to the guy I had seen earlier that week, driving the car. Kyle and the guy came up to us as we were walking along the sidewalk. "George, Jenny, hello?" Jenny and I paused until the two men approached the sidewalk. "George, meet my best friend Harry Thompson. Harry, this is our neighbor George." I shook Harry's hand and turned to introduce Jenny to Harry. "This is my wife, Jenny." I wasn't surprised when Harry let go of my hand and took Jenny's hand, looking at it like it was dessert. When you marry a woman as beautiful as Jenny, you get used to men drooling over her. But this guy had an expression on his face that I couldn't read, perhaps a smirk, as if he knew something I didn't. Now that I found out that Harry is Kylie's best friend and not some relative, my head started to buzz as to why this guy spent the night when Kyle was out of town. Was there something between Harry and Kyle's wife, Doris? Personally, I can't imagine anything worse than having a best friend sleep with his friend's wife. But perhaps there is an innocent explanation. For example, the guy came to town on business and needed somewhere to stay. So I asked, "Harry, where do you live?" Harry replied, "Across the river in St. Paul." Thus, I close this topic. Harry is not related and does not live so far away that he would need a room for the night while traveling. It remains, Harry was still looking at Jenny like he was ready to pounce on her. So I said we needed to finish walking the dog and said goodbye to Kyle and Harry. This left me with a dilemma. Should I say something to Kyle? Part of me wanted to stay out of it. Part of me realized that Kyle had been my friend since Jenny and I moved into the area 7 months ago, and if I were him, I'd want to know if my wife was sleeping with him, someone on the side. By that Sunday, I had already decided everything. While Kyle was mowing the lawn, I came over to chat. After the pleasantries, I simply said, "Kyla, on Monday night, while you were out of town, your best friend Harry spent the night at your house." Kylie's reaction could have knocked me off my feet. He even chuckled as he answered, "George, of course, did. I bet he gave Doris all the pleasure of her life." My mouth was open. I had no words in response to Kyle's statement. Kyle continued to laugh as he explained, "George, I thought you knew. Doris and I have an open relationship. It took me a few seconds to realize this. So you do this with other people? Even more, we exchange partners. Haven't you ever noticed that cars come here once every 2 months? When it's our turn to be the masters." "The owners?" Kyle looked like he was having fun with my discomfort. "Yes, George. The owners. That is, 6 or more couples, plus lucky singles like Harry, stay here, and we all switch partners." I still hadn't come up with a coherent response to Kyle's news when he asked the inevitable question, "Would you like to join us with Jenny?" "We are always looking for newcomers. Doris and I will be considered aces if we attract you too." This question brought me out of my stupor. "No, Kyle. There is no way we would participate in something like that." As I turned to leave, I heard Kyle say after me, "It's a pity. The fact is that this is not the first time recently that the question of such sexual entertainment has been raised. 3 or 4 months ago, Jenny and I were recovering from a particularly nasty hour of sex when she asked me this, 'George, what fantasies do you have?' I pondered the question as my pulse and breathing slowly returned to normal. 'I would like to make love to you on the beach.' Apparently, I didn't give Jenny the answer she was looking for. So she asked again, "Anything else?" I was almost afraid to bring this up, but I decided to give it a chance. "Do you promise that you won't think I'm a pervert if I tell you?" Jenny propped herself up on one elbow, turning to face me, as if reassuring me that I must continue. "I promise, George. What is this?" Even just thinking about it made me excited. "Remember? You promised. I want you to dress really slutty. High heels, a little black dress that barely covers your ass and your perfect breasts, showing tons of cleavage. I want you to go to the hotel bar without me." As I spoke, Jenny looked at me with even more enthusiasm. I could see that she was on edge. "I want you to sit at the bar on a high bar stool with your long legs hanging out of that little black dress. Then I would walk into the bar and pretend I didn't know you. I would buy you a drink, we would chat until you finished your drink, then I would take you out of the bar, and all the men in the bar would watch us leave. I would take you to the room I booked, and we would have sex for hours. What if one of the men at the bar tried to buy me a drink or pick me up? You would, of course, ignore them. Wouldn't you love to watch me flirt with some guy at the bar before you pick me up? Wouldn't that make you horny? No. In my kinky fantasies, you can dress like an available girl in public, but that's too kinky. What about exchanging couples during sex? Have you ever thought about having sex with another couple or multiple couples? Jenny's question shocked me. "Jenny, I have no desire to do this with any other woman, and I certainly have no desire to watch any other man do this with you." "And what? Is this your fantasy?" Jenny was smart enough to give me the correct answer. "No, George, I just asked because many couples have this fantasy. I'm just wondering if one of yours is like that." Jenny ended the conversation by bending over and making me feel good. After that, I immediately fell asleep. The conversation about fantasies was forgotten. Only a few months later, when I was telling Jenny about the goddess's parties, I remembered Jenny's question. "Have you ever thought about sex with another couple?" After leaving Kyle that afternoon, I returned to our house. Jenny sunbathed outside in a skimpy bikini. I took a beer from the refrigerator and sat next to her on the terrace. "Jenny, do you know that the Goods throw sex parties with other couples?" Jenny's answer was telling. Every time she talks to someone, Jenny pulls her sunglasses up onto the top of her head so the other person can see her blue eyes. Years ago, Jenny's father told me that he taught his children to take off their sunglasses when they were talking to someone. He told me this because he wanted me to follow the same advice. He got tired of talking to me when I shaded my eyes. He said it made me not trust him. So when Jenny turned to me, still wearing her sunglasses, while answering my question, it made me suspicious. "No, George." "What? Where did you get this idea?" "From Kyle. He said exactly that. I told him that Harry had spent Monday night at his house while he was away on a business trip. He shrugged, saying that he and Doris have an open relationship, that they exchange partners and have sex parties. Well, I don't understand why it's any of our business. I can't believe you ratted Doris out to Kyle. Why did you do that?" "Jenny, if you were going behind my back, I would want a real friend to tell me about it. It's still a scam. I thought all boys were taught not to be talkers when they grew up. It all depends on the seriousness of the offense. Small things are not talked about, but if it's important, then—" Jenny interrupted me. "What's wrong with Doris sleeping with someone else? Who is she hurting?" Before I had time to think about it, I was already answering Jenny. "Jenny, you speak as if adultery is something insignificant. For many marriages, it is a break. Most spouses have difficulty coping with the infidelity of their husbands or wives." And he was stunned by Jenny's answer. "Well, that's just stupid. It's just sex." I was still stunned and silent when Jenny diffused the entire conversation. "George, whatever the Goods do is their business, not ours. As long as we love and trust each other and remain true to our vows, we should not quarrel with each other. Come here and kiss me. You haven't kissed me for several hours." I kissed Jenny, but something in our conversation did not give me peace. What would I have thought if I hadn't been distracted by Jenny's tight body in a red bikini? Over the next few weeks, I watched Jenny more closely. I must admit that almost everything in our daily life was completely normal. Our sex life didn't suffer. We still had sex at least 3 to 4 times a week, and weekend sessions continued to blow my mind, sometimes lasting for hours. There were no external signals that would make me suspicious, with 2 exceptions. First, one day when I picked up Jenny's smartphone to look up the phone number in her contacts, the phone was locked. This was something new. Jenny had never blocked her phone before. She said it was too inconvenient. Secondly, I noticed that Jenny was clearing the history on our computer. Again, Jenny had never done this in the past. Both a locked phone and a cleared history are small things, but as someone once sang, "From small things, mama, big things one day come." None of these circumstances were difficult to resolve. With some concern that I was invading Jenny's privacy, I was able to install a program on our computer that recorded activity in the background. Jenny could erase her history, but the computer would still save it in a file that I could view. It was not difficult to crack her phone password. I very casually handed Jenny her phone and asked for her brother's phone number. He didn't even mention that the phone was locked, and Jenny didn't realize that her back was to the mirror while unlocking it. I held my phone in my hand, recording a video of the image in the mirror while I waited for her to give me Matt's number. The web pages Jenny visited over the next couple of weeks were interesting. She seemed to enjoy reading erotic stories on the internet. What bothered me most was that these stories were mostly about sex with multiple partners. Every chance I got, I read the messages on Jenny's phone, and for weeks, there was nothing out of the ordinary, no calls to anyone I might consider a potential lover. Nothing, until I told Jenny I needed to be out of town on business for a week and a half. My job as a translator usually required me to travel out of town every 2 months or so. Employees alternated business trips so that no one was constantly stuck on them. 2 days after I told her the news, during which time Jenny was acting very sad that I would be gone for so long, I read a message on Jenny's phone from Doris. We agreed on Saturday. Despite the late notice, 5 couples confirmed because you will be here again. Do you know how happy Kyle and Harry are? See you. I was angry, almost to the point where I couldn't think straight. My cheating wife, pretending to be sad, was looking forward to my absence so she could sleep with a bunch of assholes. After rereading the SMS, I almost fainted. The word again was decisive. But it's time to come to terms with it and start planning. I'll have plenty of time later to mourn the end of my marriage. The next morning, I found and made an appointment with a divorce lawyer. Then I asked my boss to let me skip this task. I made some bullshit excuse for why I couldn't go and promised that I would compensate for my replacement later. He grunted and mumbled, making a mountain out of a mountain. But this is bullshit, because in the last year I have probably backed up my colleagues at least twice. After some grumbling, he agreed that I could take the next 10 days off. On Thursday morning, I kissed Jenny goodbye and checked into the Residence Inn instead of going to the airport. I used the company credit card to rent the car, which was a clear violation of company policy. But by this time, I didn't care anymore and bought everything I thought I'd need. I met with a divorce lawyer on Friday to understand what my options were and what would happen if I divorced Jenny. It wasn't all rosy. We would basically split all of our assets in half, and I would probably end up paying her alimony for 5 years. Jenny had a part-time job that paid very little, but gave her a discount on all the clothes she bought. Jenny loved to dress beautifully. This was never a big problem. The house was always tidy, dinner was on the table most of the evening, and I made good money. Now her meager salary meant that I would have to supplement her income until she could retrain for her career. Wait, are you saying that she can ruin our entire marriage and I still have to pay her? The lawyer shrugged. Yes, since the laws changed, this is how everything happens. If you are divorcing your spouse, adultery does not matter. Now I understand how naive I was when it came to my wife and when it came to the law. Let's say I don't want the system to screw me over. What options do I have? The guy smiled. Before I say another word, write me a check for $500, because what I'm about to say implies that you and I never had this conversation and will never see each other again. I wrote out a check and gave it to him. First, let me ask you 2 questions. Do you like your job? Are there family members living nearby that you would miss? I answered, I hate my job, and my parents and sister moved to Florida. The guy leaned back in his chair. Then I will continue, but this is not legal advice. This is me telling you what I would do in your situation. He paused for a second, perhaps searching for words. I would disappear. I would take everything I could from the accounts and get out of Dodge. Another thing is, if you had children, I would never recommend that a father abandon his children, especially with a cheating mother. But in your case, I say that the world is huge. Take the time to see it. This was the last thing I expected to hear, so I had to ask, why such a radical decision? Isn't it better to take the risk in court? You chose the wrong lawyer to answer this question. 4 years ago, I found my wife with a trainer. All this was filmed, her and some pumped-up little rat in our bed. The recording showed them laughing at me, at the way I work, and they make an idiot out of me. Nasty shit. I divorced her. I even had one of the best divorce lawyers in the area, better than me. 4 years later, I still pay her every month, and will continue to do so for the next year. This is the reward you get for treating your wife like a queen, and not forcing her to get a well-paying job while you're married. Let's face it, the system is rigged against people like you and me. I left the lawyer's office, shaking my head, but already beginning to formulate my plans. But first, I need to know exactly what Jenny is doing to her neighbors. A swingers party was planned for Saturday night, and if I was lucky, it would be at the Goodies house. We'd been there often enough for barbecues and pool parties that I knew the layout of the house and knew I could settle in and spy on the festivities. But just in case, I installed a tracking app on Jenny's phone. Saturday was a long day. I spent her sitting in her hotel room waiting for her phone to show that she was on her way. I didn't have to wait too long. At 5 o'clock in the evening, Jenny left the house and went to the Goods. I drove to our neighborhood in my rental car and parked on the next block. The Goods have a small shed in their backyard, and I was able to get into it without anyone seeing me by climbing through a fence that was about 80 feet high. Over the next 2 hours, I used a cine camera and a still camera to document the entire event at the Goods. The video was shot to record various combinations of couples, threesomes, and foursomes. I filmed all the fun going on by the pool or in the room outside the patio doors. A digital camera with a telephoto lens was used to capture details. The faces of the participants were clear enough to leave no doubt about their identity. The photographs showed the most disgusting shit I could imagine. The hardest part was watching and recording my wife. Yes, she was the main attraction and the obvious star of the show. The other women present may have had decent bodies, but Jenny had the most beautiful, and most of the men took advantage of the situation. Sometimes there were several. It is impossible to understand true heartache until you see the woman you love, with whom you plan to have children and grow old together, having sex with other men. I took a video of Jenny at the Goods pool, having fun with Kyle Good and Harry Thompson. The threesome ended, and Jenny returned to the house. The patio doors were closed, but I could still see the lit room where Jenny was sitting on some guy's lap, apparently giving him a lap dance. The next guy threw her on the couch, and they started having sex. After almost 2 hours of this, I had each participant's face recorded while they were in a compromising position. It was time to leave. When I was sitting in the car, trying to calm down, I wanted to cry, but I didn't. I wanted to hurt Jenny and all her friends, but I wouldn't do it. Instead, I returned to my hotel room, buying 5 bottles of Jack Daniels along the way. I sat and thought about what to do next. I didn't get drunk. I sat up long after midnight and thought about my life and the options that the lawyer presented to me. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that, with the exception of my marriage to the woman I loved just a few hours ago, my life was crap. I hated my boss and my job, hated life in the Midwest with all its cold winters. When the temperature finally rose above freezing, it was still impossible to go outside without being eaten alive by mosquitoes, and they now carried crazy pathogens like West Nile. I hated the big house that Jenny just had to have before we had kids, with a big lawn that needed watering and fertilizer just to have to be mowed twice a week. There were very few neighbors I cared about, and that number had just been cut in half. It was now a given that I would leave Jenny. I've heard that there are guys who can tolerate their wives' infidelity, and there are even guys who enjoy it. How, I don't know, but it definitely doesn't suit me. I tried to sleep. It was hard, but it finally happened after staring at the hotel room ceiling for what seemed like hours, wondering how I screwed up and why did it happen this way. After I graduated from the University of Minnesota with a double major in German and Russian, the Army offered me a job. All I had to do was sign up for the next 4 years. The advantage of the Army over other options was that I would not be doing menial work for 2 or 3 years, but would be doing real work as a translator immediately after finishing basic training. I met Jenny my senior year while I was stationed at the Pentagon. Jenny worked as a waitress at the bar where my friends and I hung out. I won't lie, the main attraction was a pretty face, a sweet smile, and a killer body. We dated for 7 months before I popped the question. Jenny said yes, and we got married and built a house in Minneapolis 2 months after I got my leave. Jenny had limited abilities. I hate to say it, but for all of Jenny's wonderful qualities, intelligence was not one of them. I couldn't imagine how she would find another job at the bar. Hell, when we were dating, it was hard enough watching all the guys hit on her. Although it meant less money, Jenny found a part-time job selling dresses. Money wasn't an issue because I was making good money, enough to buy our dream house 4 years later, when prices had not yet fully recovered from the housing crash. Our main reasons for moving to Minneapolis stumped me for 2 years after the move. My father was given good money for early retirement. He and his mother decided to join the other Bullfinches, sold their house, and moved to sunny Florida. My sister, who never appreciated the cold winters in Minnesota, followed them. I don't want to make excuses for Jenny. There's no excuse for her going to the Goodses parties, but I think when her mom and sister moved to Florida, it left a void in Jenny's life. An emptiness that may have contributed to Jenny's subsequent attachment to our new neighbors, especially Doris. After Jenny and I bought the house, we gave ourselves a year to get it organized and ready before she got pregnant. Instead, I'm trying to sleep in this strange bed, wondering what I'll be doing in a year instead of holding my newborn baby. I woke up Sunday morning glad that I took my time last night with Jack Daniels and the hangover didn't make me feel any worse. There was a diner across the street that served a decent breakfast. I went through the list I made, a few things I wanted if I left, and a list of our assets, bank accounts, brokerage accounts, etc. The list of assets we needed to keep was short, and most of our money went towards a down payment on a house. I went to the first of 5 local car dealers looking for my next car. After finding what I wanted at 2 dealers, I made a deal with the one who gave me the best offer, and drove off the dealer's lot with a used converted van and a check for $2,000, leaving my year-old Chrysler a $300 behind. The dealer got the best deal, but I did everything right, and now I had a car in which I could travel. Tuesday and Wednesday were spent getting my finances in order and equipping my camper with everything I needed for a long trip. I was ready by Thursday, a full day before the deadline, and one of the days Jenny was working at the store. Back at our house, I loaded the van with everything I wanted. There weren't many things, and they didn't fill the van more than necessary. I left a note on the kitchen table with 2 photographs, one of her with Goose and Thompson, and the other of our wedding, torn in half. I thought about keeping my engagement ring, but figured I could sell it somewhere down the road. It was gold and must have cost at least a tank of gas. The note read, "Jenny, I will not live with a liar and a cheat. Goodbye." My first stop was Naples, Florida, where my folks moved after my father retired. The van was a pleasure to drive. I spent 12 hours driving each day, mostly on country roads, before finding a campsite for the night. I quickly learned that there are good campsites and terrible ones. I'll have to learn to differentiate one from the other if I'm going to be traveling for any length of time. On the evening of the 3rd day, I came to my parents. My mom hugged me tightly, and even my dad hugged me like a man. They knew that I would come to visit, but did not know the details. It wouldn't be easy. They both loved Jenny and were looking forward to the call that they were going to be grandparents. What happened, George? Why are you here? I didn't want to go into detail right away. Not here, not on their porch. When we got inside, I had to ask. Did Jenny call and look for me? Mom looked sadly into her eyes. Why would she call and look for you? Doesn't she know you're here? She's probably too embarrassed to call and talk to either of you. I left Jenny. I caught her cheating. Mom was shocked. I can't believe it, not Jenny. Please believe me, Mom. I don't want to show you photographs for the sake of proof. She contacted our neighbors, a spouse exchange group. Father finally found his voice. Why? The devil knows. I found out about this and decided to run away. I haven't talked to Jenny and I don't plan to. Are you getting a divorce? That's the point, Dad. I went to a lawyer and found out what a mess I would be in if we went to court for a divorce. I will pay her alimony for years, and during this time she will freely have fun with her neighbors. I chose the path of a coward. I quit my job, bought a van, and planned to move around for a while. That's not like you, son. Does not look like it, but maybe it's time for a change of heart. I graduated from college in 3 years and immediately went into the Army, where I spent 4 years. Came out, got a job within the first month, got married, and then spent the last 5 years trying to make it so I could raise kids with the love of my life. And here I am. I am 30 years old. No kids, no wife, a 4-year-old van, and about $6,000 to my name. Damn good deal, right? Mom weighed everything. Isn't there a way to forgive Jenny and return to her? Well, that is, if she apologizes and promises never to do that again. I felt sorry for my mother. She was always an optimist, always ready to forgive, always ready to think only good things about people. I hugged her. No, Mom, you didn't see what I saw. She's not with just one guy. Didn't you hear her claim that she would miss me when she thought I was leaving on a business trip? Before arranging a meeting with neighbors and their friends, lying was almost as bad as infidelity. Both destroyed my trust in her. About 7 o'clock, my sister Gina appeared at our parents' house. I was glad to see my little sister again. Even though she was 5 years younger than me, we were pretty close until I left home for college. When I came home for the holidays, we always found time to talk. But when I joined the Army, maintaining this closeness became more difficult. Until this evening, I didn't realize how much I miss her and how much she has matured. We walked along the beach. The sun had just set, and the sky was bright red. When Mom and Dad weren't around, we could talk freely. Jenny called me last night. She said that you left and left only a note. Did she tell you what the note said or why I left? No. I just asked that if I received news from you, I would ask you to call her so that she could explain everything. Tell me, big brother, what happened? Jenny got involved in the sexual entertainment of our neighbors. Without me, of course. I had to leave town on business. She took advantage of this to attend the party while I was away. I have videos of her with 5 different guys. I think Gina was taken aback by my revelation. Not a damn thing. What, did you hire a private detective? No, I didn't leave the city because I knew that something would happen. I saw a message on her phone. I stayed at a hotel nearby and filmed the party myself. They weren't too secretive. As soon as I had proof, I quit my job, bought a van, and left Minneapolis. Now I'm going to travel for a while. I'll start with the States and, if there is money, maybe to Europe. What about Jenny? Are you going to divorce her? As I already told my mom and dad, divorce will cripple me. I'll be paying her for years. It will not happen. I'll just leave it all behind. Maybe you can take your little sister with you. I have a few weeks of vacation coming up, and I would like to spend them on the road with you, as long as I don't bother you. Gina gave me a sly smile. Gina, it's not about finding a replacement for Jenny. It's about getting my head in order. Understood. Anyway, if you're heading out west, I'd like to come with you for a couple of weeks. I heard Utah is very beautiful. Agreed. We will do this in the fall, when there will be fewer people and it will not be so hot. Now I need you to do me a big favor. I need your experience with computers. Gina was one of those rare women who didn't let misogynistic jerks stop her from becoming an expert programmer. "What do you need, big brother?" I told Gina about the videos and footage I had from Jenny's sex party and what I planned to do with them. As I laid out my revenge, Gina's smile grew until she couldn't help but laugh. "I agree, big brother. I can arrange this. It took several weeks to piece everything together and cover our tracks so that none of us could be traced. But 3 weeks after I left Minnesota, everything was ready." I knew Gina was good with computers, but what she was able to do blew me away. First, Gina and the guy she's dating, Dennis, found the names and personal information of all the singles and all but one of the couples who frequented the hoods parties. It took just 2 days to send phishing emails to all the participants' computers, which, when the recipient clicked on the link, downloaded a virus that gave Gina all the contacts of the tags, as we came to call these people, including email addresses. It was a goldmine. Kyle Good, who owned a local John Deere dealership, became a prime target. Gina and Dennis hacked into the store's work computer and downloaded the email and physical addresses of its customers. A website was created, hosted by a company from Ukraine specializing in amateur adult films. When I asked how we managed to do all this without being tracked, Gina and Dennis just laughed and then tried to explain that the web host was paid in Bitcoin and all the routing went through so many iterations that it would be the CIA. I nodded my head as they explained it all, but it still didn't make any sense, so I decided to trust their experience. Harry Thompson was an enigma. We were unable to hack into his computer and were unable to discover much personal information. He was not on Facebook, LinkedIn, or other social networks. Goody's computer didn't have his email address. We couldn't find where Harry worked. A complete mystery. Dennis suggested that Harry was probably doing some illegal shit, and we eventually gave up trying to find anything about him. Gina and Dennis had a friend who was a video editor, and he took the time to create an entertaining movie from the videos and photos. Each time the video showed a new sex scene, the action was paused long enough to superimpose close-ups from the stills to identify the actors. The 45-minute video was uploaded to the site and ready. This next part will probably anger some people and make others shake their heads in disgust. When we edited the video, I didn't show the scene where Jenny had sex with Kyle and Harry. We only kept the scene of Jenny pleasing one of the other men, but only one scene, enough to show her participation in the group's activities, but not so much as to cause her great embarrassment. More than one person has asked me why I didn't throw Jenny's ass under the bus and expose her depravity, and I only have one answer: Jenny's parents. Robert and Linda Rawlings are two of the sweetest and nicest people I have ever known. They accepted me into their home, treated me like a son, and if they ever have to see or hear about our video, they deserve better than to see their daughter in that light, even if she herself doesn't deserve more for breaking my heart. So while the video proved Jenny was a contestant, it didn't include any of her worst moments. One sunny Florida morning, Gina came to our parents' house where I was staying, sat down at the kitchen table with her ever-present cup of black coffee and asked a question. "Everything is ready, big brother. The site is up. The email is loaded. A couple hundred letters to good customers who don't have email are stamped and ready to send. Are you ready to pull the plug? It's time to act." "Yes, Gina, it's time. Let's get started and have some fun." Gina took out her phone and said, "Dennis, send emails." Gina looked up at me. "One of our friends is going to Vegas today. He'll put the letters in the mailbox when he lands so no one can track their return here. I think we covered our tracks as best we could." "Thank you, Gina. Thanks for everything. Tomorrow I fly out and begin my travels." Gina handed me a credit card. Dennis suggested something else. It was his idea for me to get a credit card in my name, for those times when you need to pay for something and cannot use cash. He said many state and national campgrounds require reservations and require a credit card. It's in my name, but if you put the reservation in my name and I don't complain to the bank's fraud department about the charges, it won't matter. This way, no one can track you using your card. This one has a $5,000 line of credit. You can pay me when it is convenient for you. I hugged Gina. It was almost too much to expect. "Thank you. Thanks to Dennis, too." Well, don't forget that you promised that we would soon spend some time traveling together. Like I said, it's too hot and too crowded in Utah's national parks right now. Let's plan to meet at the end of September and visit one of these parks. Having agreed to spend 2 weeks in September, Gina went to work. I got out and prepared the van for the trip. The next morning, I kissed my mom goodbye and gave my dad a manly hug. Thanked them for letting me stay for a while, promised to stay safe and stay in touch. Then my father surprised me by leaning into the open passenger door window of the van. I love you, son. I always knew he loved me. He showed it to me in 1,000 ways growing up, but he never said it before. My eyes watered as I backed up. I took the circuitous roads north to Virginia on the Blue Ridge Parkway and spent a week traveling southwest to North Carolina. Went north to Nashville, where I spent 2 days on Broadway listening to great music. Visited Shiloh National Monument. I've always wanted to see it since I did a report on Western Civil War battles back in high school. I headed west with a plan to stop in Memphis, to spend time on Beale Street, and maybe visit Graceland. It was late at night, and I was sleeping in a van parked on the side of State Route 64, east of Bolivar, Tennessee, when I was awakened by a knock on the door. It was a state patrol officer standing there with one hand on the butt of his service pistol. The holster was unfastened. "How can I help you, officer? How long have you been parked here?" "I arrived last night around 10. I was too tired to drive any further, so I decided to sleep for a few hours." "Can I see your driver's license, please?" I handed him my license, and he went back to his patrol car to make the call. I sat in the passenger seat and waited for him to return. When he returned, I was worried. There was something in the way he looked at me. He still had his hand on the gun. "Mr. Baker, did you know that there was a warrant out for your arrest?" "No, I didn't know. And it says what I allegedly did?" "I don't know the details. It's a misdemeanor arrest warrant. Is there a reason someone is looking for you in Minnesota?" I told the officer my version of what happened. Then he added, "I guess some judge awarded my wife alimony, but I didn't pay it." The officer smiled. "Well, I have to bring you, but now I need to chase that car over there that just drove past at speed. I think it's a drunk driver, and that takes precedence over your warrant. You can stay here and wait for me to return, or since it's 30 minutes from the state line, you can drive south on Highway 18 and get out of my jurisdiction." Do you understand what I'm talking about? I didn't see any cars driving by, so I figured the guy was giving me a break. Perhaps he had his own story of heartbreak, and nodded. "Yes, officer. You don't want this to come back to me, do you?" "Officer, you can ask anyone, even my future ex-wife. I would rather cut off my left hand than let down someone who has done me a good deed. I bet you're right-handed, right?" "Okay, I'll cut off my right hand if you ever hear that I've let you down. I advise you to cross the border as soon as possible." With this, he went west, and I went south to Mississippi. Given that I missed Beale Street, the siren song of New Orleans and its Bourbon Street was calling to me, and I continued south. 3 days of drinking and listening to jazz, Zydeco, and Creole music had put a hole in my wallet. I took off my gold wedding ring, bought a tank of gas, 2 bottles of Dixie, and a huge bowl of etouffee, then headed west out of town. I needed to avoid big cities and the associated expenses until my funds ran out. I still had a few thousand left, but I was spending it too quickly. Along the way, I talked to several other vagabonds and learned from them how to limit the expenses associated with my new lifestyle. Learned how cheap it is to dry camp on BLM lands. One of the couples I met on the road suggested that I go to Big Bend National Park. They said this place was like heaven. What the hell? I have nowhere to go and no one is waiting for me to get there. I went to Big Bend. Continued in the next video. Subscribe to the channel and click on the bell so you don't miss the second final part. The link to the second part will be in the description of this video below. Subscribe to our channel so that your second chaff doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think about listening to the next one.